The Ghosts of Lake Erie. Cleveland, Ohio, is a city built on grit and ghost stories. The mist rolling off Lake Erie carries with it the whispers of past glories and more recent, profound heartbreaks. For decades, the factory whistles have been replaced by the collective groan of a fan base whose loyalty has been tested in ways that would break a lesser people. They are the Dog Pound, a name that evokes ferocity, but which, in quiet moments, betrays a deep, lingering vulnerability. At the center of this emotional maelstrom stands First Energy Stadium, a hulking structure on the lakefront that has served as both cathedral and torture chamber. Within its confines, the ghosts of quarterbacks past hold a permanent, mournful vigil. There's the ghost of Bernie Kosar, the local hero whose unorthodox delivery brought them to the brink of glory, only to be cast aside in a move that still feels like a betrayal. The ghost of Tim Couch, the first overall pick tasked with resurrecting an expansion team, his potential crushed under an avalanche of sacks and expectations. The ghost of Johnny Manziel, a cautionary tale of hype over substance, a dazzling college talent who evaporated in the professional spotlight, and most recently, the complicated ghost of Baker Mayfield, who for one glorious, beer-soaked season, made them believe the curse was broken, only to see it all crumble into acrimony and departure. This is the legacy. This is the quarterback curse that hangs over the franchise like a pall. It's not just a statistic, it's a psychological weight, a self-fulfilling prophecy of despair. Every new signal caller who dons the seal brown and orange isn't just playing a position. He's stepping into an arena to battle 60 years of collective trauma. Into this arena, two men arrived with a shared goal, but fundamentally different maps to the promised land. Andrew Berry did not look like a man who would bet his career on a fifth-round draft pick. With his crisp suits, measured tone, and a background in analytical front offices, he was the picture of the modern NFL executive. He was hired to bring order to the chaos, to use data and cold, hard logic to exorcise the ghosts. He had overseen a rebuild that fortified the offensive line, assembled a terrifying defense, and created a culture of, if not winning, then at least competence. But Andrew Berry harbored a secret belief. That logic alone couldn't solve Cleveland's central problem. You couldn't spreadsheet your way out of a quarterback curse. You needed something more. You needed magic. You needed belief. You needed a player who wasn't just skilled, but who was unafraid of the ghosts. He found that player in Shedeur Sanders, the son of the most flamboyant, confident, and iconic defensive player in NFL history. Deion Primetime Sanders, Shedeur, was born into the spotlight. He wasn't just a quarterback, he was a narrative. At Jackson State and later Colorado, he didn't just play football. He performed under a microscope, with his father as his coach and a legion of critics waiting for him to fail. He played with a swagger that some mistook for arrogance, but which those who looked closer recognized as a profound and unshakable belief in his own preparation and ability. When Shedeur declared for the draft, the analytics were not kind. They pointed to his unorthodox footwork, his sometimes reckless abandon outside the pocket, and the fact that he played in a system that wasn't a direct analog to the NFL. The pundits called him a project. Some questioned his commitment. The glare of his father's legacy, they said, would be too bright. But Andrew Berry saw what the spreadsheets missed. He saw the arm talent that could make every throw on the field. He saw the pre-snap intelligence, the ability to diagnose defenses that belied his age. Most importantly, he saw the poise. While other prospects crumbled under combine interviews, Shedeur embraced them. The pressure that broke others seemed to energize him. Berry believed that in Cleveland, where pressure was a constant, immutable fact of life, this wasn't just a nice trait. It was a survival instinct. The draft room on day 3 was tense. Berry sat at the head of the table, the ghost of 100 failed quarterbacks looming in the back of his mind. "We can take a safety here," one of his scouts suggested. "Depth at linebacker," offered another. Berry stared at the board. Shedeur Sanders was still available. The project label had scared everyone else off. "This is it," Berry said, his voice quiet but firm. "This is the one. We're ending this. Right here, right now." There were murmurs. It was only a 5th-round pick, a low-risk gamble, but they all knew it was more than that. Andrew Berry wasn't just drafting a player, he was planting a flag. The phone call to Shedeur was brief. "You ready to change a city, kid?" Berry asked. On the other end of the line, Shedeur Sanders didn't hesitate. "I was born ready." Kevin Stefanski was everything. Andrew Berry was not. Where Berry was sleek and corporate, Stefanski was gruff and grounded, a football lifer with a play sheet for a soul. He had earned his stripes as an offensive coordinator, building a reputation on a system that prioritized ball control, timing, and minimizing mistakes. His ideal quarterback was a point guard, efficient, intelligent, and above all, predictable. He didn't need a hero, he needed a conductor. Stefanski had endured his own Cleveland purgatory. He had weathered the Baker Mayfield roller coaster, the Deshaun Watson controversy, and the constant churn of instability. Through it all, he had maintained the respect of his locker room, particularly the defense, by projecting an image of unflappable, consistent toughness. He was a coach who believed in process over outcomes, in system over individuals. When Andrew Berry drafted Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round, Stefanski saw his guy. Gabriel was the prototype. He had a quick release, made good decisions, and operated efficiently within the structure of the offense. He was coachable, quiet, and his ceiling, while perhaps not astronomical, had a solid, dependable floor. He was, in Stefanski's eyes, safe. The drafting of Shedeur Sanders felt, to Stefanski, like a repudiation. It was Berry, the man in the suite, telling the man on the grass, "Your system isn't enough. We need a savior." From day one of training camp, the divide was palpable. Stefanski would watch Gabriel execute a perfect 7-yard out route on time and give a curt, satisfied nod. Then he'd watch Shedeur, faced with the same defensive look, escape a collapsing pocket, scramble to his right, and launch a 40-yard dart down the sideline that defied all conventional quarterback mechanics. The crowd would erupt. The highlights would play on a loop on ESPN, and Stefanski would grimace. To him, it wasn't brilliance, it was chaos. It was a recipe for a fumble or a catastrophic interception. It was a breakdown of his process. The media, of course, was obsessed with Shedeur. Every press conference became an interrogation about the rookie. Stefanski's answers were terse, filled with qualifiers. "He's making progress. He has a lot to learn. We're looking for consistency." Meanwhile, his praise for Gabriel, while never effusive, was unconditional. "Dillon's our starter. We believe in what Dillon can do." The locker room began to sense the schism. The defense, Stefanski's stalwarts, largely sided with the coach's disciplined approach. The offensive weapons, the speedy receivers and pass-catching backs, started to gravitate towards the electricity Shedeur brought to the huddle. There was a buzz when he was on the field, a sense that anything was possible. The tension was a silent, low-grade hum in the building. Until the catalyst. Dillon Gabriel went down with a high ankle sprain in a brutal loss to Pittsburgh. The season, teetering on the brink, was now placed in the hands of the rookie. The project was over. It was time for Shedeur Sanders to start. The Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas is a palace of illusions, a dome where reality is suspended and fortunes are won and lost in the blink of an eye. For the Cleveland Browns, it was the perfect backdrop for their internal drama to play out on a national stage. The entire football world was watching. This wasn't just another game. It was the debut of a Sanders. The narrative was irresistible. Could the son of primetime lift the NFL's most cursed franchise? Kevin Stefanski's game plan for Shedeur was, by all accounts, conservative. A heavy dose of the run game. Short, high-percentage passes. Don't turn the ball over. Manage the game. It was a plan designed to protect Shedeur from himself. A plan that screamed, "We don't trust you." For the first quarter, it played out that way. The offense was stagnant, predictable. Then, in the second quarter, on a 3rd and long, the play broke down. The Raiders' pass rush, smelling blood, closed in. What happened next was not in Stefanski's playbook. Shedeur Sanders, with a fluidity that seemed to defy physics, sidestepped a defensive end, kept his eyes downfield, and drifted to his left. He wasn't running in panic. He was buying time. He saw a blur of speed down the sideline Isaiah Bond, on a broken route, finding open grass. With a flick of his wrist, a motion that seemed almost nonchalant, Shedeur launched a parabola that traveled 52 yards in the air and dropped perfectly into Bond's stride. The stadium, filled with a partisan Raiders crowd, fell silent for a moment, then erupted in a mix of groans and awed applause. On the sideline, Kevin Stefanski did not cheer. He turned to his offensive coordinator, his face a mask of frustration, and pointed angrily at the field, likely criticizing the route deviation. Andrew Berry, watching from the suite above, allowed himself a small, tight smile. This was what he had seen. This was the magic. The game continued, and Shedeur began to impose his will, not through audibles or complex reads, but through sheer, transcendent talent. He took a simple screen pass, and, with a touch so soft it seemed to float, led his running back into a seam that exploded for a 66-yard touchdown. He moved in the pocket with a veteran's calm, sensing pressure, stepping up and delivering strikes. He took one single sack for a loss of 3 yards, a stat line that was, for a rookie behind a patchwork line, nothing short of miraculous. The defense, led by the otherworldly Myles Garrett, was indeed the engine of the victory. Garrett was a force of nature, recording 5 sacks and living in the Raiders' backfield. He was the established superstar, the bedrock of the franchise. When the clock hit 0, the score was 24-10. The Browns had their first road win in what felt like an eternity, and a rookie quarterback had won his first start for the Cleveland Browns for the first time since 1995. History had been made. The visitors' locker room in Allegiant Stadium was a cacophony of pure, unadulterated joy. Music blared. Players who had endured a losing streak whooped and hollered, slapping each other on the shoulder pads. The relief was palpable, a pressure valve finally released. At the center of it all was Shedeur Sanders. Still in his uniform, his helmet off, he was being mobbed by his teammates. Offensive linemen, the men who protect him, were ruffling his hair. Receivers were pounding his chest. For a moment, the curse felt distant, a ghost banished by the sheer force of this new energy. The kid had done it. He had stared down the history and the pressure, and hadn't just survived. He had thrived. This is the moment in the NFL's unwritten script where the head coach, the leader of men, steps in to cement the moment. He gathers the team. He praises the effort. And he singles out the rookie quarterback who made history, presenting him with the game ball, a tangible symbol of achievement, of respect, of passage. The cameras, always present for the post-game speech, rolled. The players quieted down, turning towards their coach. Kevin Stefanski stepped into the center of the room, a game ball in his hand. He looked around at the expectant faces. His eyes met Shedeur's, bright with the thrill of victory. He saw Andrew Berry standing near the back, arms crossed, watching intently. Stefanski cleared his throat. The room fell silent. "Great fight today, men," he began, his voice gruff. "That's the kind of toughness we need. Defense, you were phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. You set the tone." He paused, letting the cheers for the defense subside. And there's one man who embodied that today. He held the game ball aloft. Every player, every reporter, assumed the next words would be Shedeur Sanders. It was inevitable. It was right. "Myles Garrett," Stefanski boomed. "This is for you." A roar went up from the defensive players. Myles Garrett, a humble giant, smiled graciously and accepted the ball, holding it above his head. He deserved it. No one could argue that. But in that same instant, a different sound was heard. A collective, almost imperceptible intake of breath from others in the room. The offensive players looked confused. The cameras, with their unblinking lenses, immediately swiveled from Garrett to Shedeur Sanders. The rookie's smile didn't vanish, but it froze, then tightened. It became a professional mask. He clapped for his teammate, but the light in his eyes had dimmed. The moment that was his had been pivoted, redirected, and handed to someone else. It was a stunning, calculated decision. It wasn't an oversight. It was a message. Don't get too big for your britches, rookie. The defense won this game. Know your place. As the celebration for Garrett continued, Andrew Berry watched from the periphery, his jaw tightening. He saw the look on his quarterback's face. He saw the deflation. Without a second thought, he began to move. He weaved through the players, ignoring the media, his focus singular. He approached Shedeur, who was now standing slightly apart from the main celebration. Barry didn't offer a handshake. He didn't give a pat on the back. He opened his arms and pulled the rookie into a full, genuine, heartfelt embrace. It was a hug that lasted a few seconds too long to be merely ceremonial. He leaned in and spoke words into Shedeur's ear that were meant for him and him alone, but whose meaning was clear to everyone watching. I see you. I'm proud of you. This was your moment, and he took it from you. But I've got your back. The cameras caught it all. The snub and the hug. The coach's cold pragmatism and the GM's fiery belief. In 60 seconds, the entire power struggle of the Cleveland Browns had been broadcast to the world. The reaction was immediate and nuclear. Shannon Sharpe, on his wildly popular podcast, Nightcap, nearly blew out his microphone. What in the wide world of sports was Kevin Stefanski thinking? You mean to tell me that a rookie quarterback, the son of the legend, comes into the den of iniquity that is Las Vegas and does what no Browns rookie has done since I was in the league? And you can't give him a game ball. You give it to Myles Garrett, a deserving man, a future Hall of Famer, but you have 2 balls. You have 2 hands. This is disrespect of the highest order. This tells me that Kevin Stefanski does not want that young man to succeed. Social media became a wildfire. Memes of Stefanski, photoshopped to look like a grumpy cartoon villain, circulated alongside clips of Shedeur's magnificent throws. Number Fire Stefanski and Number Free Shedeur started trending in Cleveland. The national media piled on. Pundits questioned Stefanski's leadership, his ability to manage personalities, his ego. Through it all, Shedeur Sanders said nothing. His social media posts were about the team victory. He praised the offensive line. He praised Myles Garrett. He praised the coaching staff. It was a masterclass in public relations, a maturity that made his coach's actions look even more petty. The following Monday, Kevin Stefanski walked into the press conference room knowing he was walking into an ambush. The air was thick with anticipation. He took his seat, his body language closed off, arms folded, shoulders hunched. The first question was a softball about the defense. He answered curtly. Then came the question everyone was waiting for. Kevin, why didn't you give Shedeur Sanders a game ball after his historic performance on Sunday? Stefanski shifted in his seat. He looked down at the podium, then back at the reporter. You know, every game we try to highlight guys who do good jobs. He started, his words beginning to meander. We're constantly recognizing players in different ways. Myles Garrett's performance was, probably pretty worthy of a game ball. We had a punt returner who had a big return. We spent time that morning pointing out all the guys who did good jobs. It was a rambling, deflecting monologue. He talked about the team, the unit, the process. He used the phrase, the quarterback, and the rookie. But as the analysts would later scream from their television sets, he never once said, Shedeur Sanders. Not once. The deliberate omission was a thunderclap. It was no longer subtext. It was text. The head coach of the Cleveland Browns could not, or would not, utter the name of his starting quarterback. The body language experts had a field day. He's minimizing, one said on a sports talk show. He's using distancing language. He can't even bring himself to personally acknowledge the player. This is a sign of deep-seated resentment. Meanwhile, in his office, Andrew Barry rewatched the press conference with a growing sense of cold fury. This was no longer about a game ball. This was about the future of his franchise. He had staked his reputation on Shedeur Sanders, and his head coach was actively, publicly undermining that investment. The hug had been a necessary counterstrike, but it wasn't a long-term solution. The war was now out in the open. Insiders began to talk. Stephen A. Smith, with his deep network of sources, went on First Take and laid it bare. My sources in Cleveland tell me this is a disaster waiting to happen, he boomed. Andrew Barry is all in on Shedeur Sanders. He believes this kid is the next great one. But Kevin Stefanski and his staff, they ain't believers. They wanted Dylan Gabriel. They think Shedeur is a freelancer. a disruptor. They don't want to build around him. They want to manage him until their guy is healthy. This is a power struggle, and the locker room is choosing sides. The fault lines within the organization became canyons. The Barry faction. The front office, the scouts who believed in Shedeur's talent, and a growing number of offensive players. They saw Shedeur's ceiling as a championship-level talent. They were tired of the same old Browns and were electrified by the potential for something special. The Stefanski faction. The defensive core, led by the respected Myles Garrett and the old-school coaches. They valued discipline and system above individual brilliance. They saw Stefanski as the steady hand who had guided them through tough times, and believed his process was what would ultimately lead to sustained success, not the flashy, unpredictable play of a rookie. The comparison to other teams was damning. When C.J. Stroud had success in Houston, his coach, DeMeco Ryans, was his biggest cheerleader. The relationship was symbiotic. In San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan designed his entire offense around Brock Purdy's strengths. In Cleveland, it felt like Stefanski was designing an offense in spite of Shedeur's strengths, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. The Gabriel double standard became a talking point. When Gabriel was 1-3 as a starter, turning the ball over and looking overwhelmed, Stefanski's support was unwavering. Dillon is our guy. Now, with Shedeur 1-0 with a historic performance, the support was laced with caution. We'll evaluate week to week. The disparity was glaring. What was Shedeur thinking? He was professional, but those close to him said the excitement of his debut had been leached away by the coach's actions. The joy of the victory was now tinged with the anxiety of knowing his own leader didn't have his back. How does a young player develop confidence in that environment? The following Sunday looms. The Browns are back home, facing a tough division rival. The entire city is buzzing, but the buzz is different. It's not just about winning a football game. It's about validation. All eyes will be on Kevin Stefanski. Will he call a game that unleashes Shedeur Sanders, or will he revert to the conservative game manager script? If Shedeur throws an early interception, will Stefanski yank him, using it as justification to return to Gabriel? If Shedeur leads another game-winning drive, will Stefanski finally, publicly embrace him? All eyes will be on Andrew Berry's suite. His expression, his reactions, will be dissected frame by frame. And all eyes will be on Shedeur Sanders, the kid with the weight of a city and the ghost of his father's legacy on his shoulders, now carrying the additional burden of an organizational civil war. He will step onto the field at First Energy Stadium, and the roar of the dog pound will be for him. They have chosen their side. They have seen the magic. They are tired of the ghosts. But in the NFL, belief from the fans and the GM can only take you so far. You need your coach to believe in you too. And in Cleveland, that is the one thing in desperately short supply. The game ball controversy was never about a piece of leather. It was the first, loudest shot in a war for the soul of a franchise. The battle has been joined. And in this war, there can be only one victor. Either Kevin Stefanski's process will prevail, or Andrew Berry's belief will be vindicated. The fate of the Cleveland Browns and the career of a potentially generational talent hangs in the balance. The ghosts are watching, waiting to see if they will finally be laid to rest, or if a new, more painful